heck's going on here? I haven't seen anything suck worse than this since Mike Evans in week 5. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Welcome back to the Draft.com studios, where today we're talking about them ball catchers. Yep, week 6 fantasy football wide receivers, who we starting, who we sitting. Now we're starting to get into the bye weeks. There's some injuries racking up, some studs that are really underperforming. So what do we do here going forward? That's what we're going to talk about today going forward. But before we get into it, once again, we stay transparent on this channel. Do me a favor, hit the like button for being transparent. Not too many people do that. So let's see how we did in week 5. All right, so here we go, week 5. And as you can see, we had a total of 60 players that finished their games this weekend that we gave a start or sit designation to. Out of those 60, we got 36 of them correct for 60% accuracy here on wide receivers last week in week 5. Some of our biggest hits, maybe one of the best calls we've had all year. Will Fuller was a start for us last week, and yeah, Will Fuller absolutely exploded. Also like Calvin Ridley. A lot of people hopped off that bandwagon. He bounced back last week. Julian Edelman, a solid performance, especially in PPR leagues. Adam Thielen. Everybody was hating on the Minnesota Vikings passing game. Adam Thielen came out and had himself a day. Some of our biggest misses, Larry Fitzgerald. Really expected more out of Fitzgerald with no Christian Kirk. He was a disappointment. The Green Bay wide receivers, with no Devontae Adams, I expected a little bit more out of MVS or Geronimo Allison. Neither one of them performed. Emmanuel Sanders had himself a sucky Sunday, and Josh Gordon failed to really make a big play in a great opportunity this past weekend. Those were some of the bigger misses here for the week, but 60% overall when you take into account that some of the big name studs, like the sucky Mike Evans from week 5, really go into affecting this percentage. It's not a bad week. I'm pretty happy with 60% as long as we have these underperforming studs. If all the big names are performing and then we were still hitting 60%, then I'd start to worry a little bit. But I'll take 60%. But here we go. Moving into week 6, who we starting, who we sitting right now. All right, here we go. Thursday night football, kicking it off with the depleted New York Giants going up against one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL, the New England Patriots. But one thing to watch for this game is the weather report. They're expecting some wind and some rain here in Foxborough this week, so pay attention to that. Now, should it be, strong enough to really impact the play of this game? No, probably not. However, it's something just to pay attention to, just to be on the safe side. This is a great matchup, though, for New England. I mean, right now, the Giants allow 31 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And Julian Edelman is going to be an obvious start for me once again. He's had 41 targets through the first 5 games, and don't forget, he missed some time there in one of those weeks with a rib injury. Right now, he's 5th in the NFL in yards of separation per target. Now, what that means is that's how open he's getting. 2.3 yards of separation is how far the defender is away from Julian Edelman on each of his targets. He's getting wide open. 2.3 yards is ridiculously wide open. But we're also going to roll with Josh Gordon once again this week, especially because there's no Philip Dorsett. He will not play this week. Josh Gordon really doesn't have to worry about competing for targets there with Dorsett. He has that big play upside. Where he may be slightly limited is if the weather is a little bit too bad. That may limit that deep ball, that big play, and he may have to live underneath a little bit more. Gordon right now is currently 13th in the NFL in yards after catch, though, so it's only a matter of time before the ball gets in his hand and he breaks a big one. I'm really worried to start any of the wide receivers, well, whoever's left of any of the wide receivers, though, for the New York Football Giants. There's no Saquon Barkley, no Wayne Gallman, no Sterling Shepard, no Evan Ingram. It's literally like Golden Tate and rookie Darius Slayton. Tate in his second game ever with the Giants with a rookie quarterback in Danny Dimes. I mean, nothing about this is intriguing. And then you take all that and you add on top of it that the New England defense right now is number 1 against opposing wide receivers, giving up only 13.9 fantasy points per game. Nah, I'm passing on everybody there in New York. Moving on to Sunday, here we go, but it's a London game. We got the Carolina Panthers and Tampa Bay Buccaneers in London, and I'm going to be a little bit bold here. A lot of people a little irritated with the inconsistencies of one Mike Evans. Now, we all know the ceiling is huge. He can win you your fantasy day all by himself. He has that capability, but right now, he's a little bit too reliant on just the deep ball. But why I'm really worried about Mike Evans this week, he played and faced up against James Bradbury, the defensive back of the Carolina Panthers, twice last season. How did those 2 games go? Well, in the 2 games combined, he had 5 receptions for 64 yards. Right now, James Bradberry is the number 4 ranked defensive back on playerprofiler.com. The guy is a legit corner, and he's shut down Mike Evans a few times here in the past. Who do I want? I want Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right now, Chris Godwin is playing out of his mind. He's currently averaging 2.86 fantasy points per target. That means for every target he's getting 2.86 fantasy points on top of it. Right now, that's number 1 in the league. He's also number 5 in the NFL in yards after the catch and number 6 in contested catch rate, which means even if Jameis is off target a little bit, this guy can go and get it. Right now, he's number 4 in the NFL in red zone reception, so the touchdown upside is there. He's absolutely killing it. I want a lot of Chris Godwin here once again. Now, on the Carolina Panthers side of the ball, I'm going to start both DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel here. I don't want to say it's impossible to run on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because it's not. And obviously with a back like Christian McCaffrey, they're going to run the football in Carolina. However, they may not find as much success as they have here in the past few weeks running the ball and may have to rely on the passing game a little bit more. What does that do? It opens things up for DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. The defense is going to have to be honest. They're going to have to stay in the box and pay attention to Christian McCaffrey or he will absolutely kill them. Right now, Tampa Bay allowing 29.5 fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Great matchup in a game they're going to have to throw. I'll start both DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. All right, everybody, stay calm. Stay calm. It's the matchup you've all been waiting for. The epic battle of the Washington Redskins and the Miami Dolphins. I mean, people have been talking about this game for weeks. No, they haven't. Nobody probably really gives 2 craps about this game with the people outside of Washington and Miami here, to be realistic. But there are a few pieces here that are somewhat fantasy relevant that we need to talk about. One of them, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver, Washington Redskins. He's going to be a start this week. And why? Well, new coaching staff has come in and they have named Case Keenum the quarterback once again. Why do we care about Case Keenum, Jake? Thank you for asking. It's because the first 3 weeks of the season, when Keenum played with McLaurin racked up 16 receptions, 257 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and was fantasy football wide receiver number 8 overall. And now they get the secondary of the Miami Dolphins, who give up on average 27.9 fantasy points per game. Sign me up from some Terry McLaurin here in week 6. Paul Richardson, on the other hand, a little bit still too inconsistent for me. I don't really trust him in the lineup. He's shown to be serviceable at times. However, there's so many options at wide receiver. The floor is so low. The ceiling is kind of inconsistent, like I mentioned. I'm not willing to take that risk with Paul Richardson here just yet. But what about on the Miami Dolphins side of things? Right now, their top target, it's going to be Preston Williams. It's not Devontae Parker. Fantasy Bigfoot, makes appearances at times. There's sightings, but they're few and far between. I'm going with Preston Williams this week. The 2 games prior to their bye week, he had 19 targets. And right now, the Washington Redskins are giving up, on average, 30.2 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. It's a big gamble. It's a big risk. If you're in a deep league looking for a play, Preston Williams is somebody that I would take a look at. He may not be the best option you have, and I'm not going to sit somebody higher up the rankings to try to take a gamble on Preston Williams. However, if you're looking for somebody in a pinch, the upside is absolutely huge this week. All right, Eagles and Vikings, and I'm sorry, but I have to do it one last time. This is it. Last chance for Stephon Diggs, throwing him in the start column. And this one is really based off of matchup alone. Thielen and Diggs both going to be starts for me, and it's really because the Philadelphia Eagles allow so many points to opposing wide receivers. Right now, the 5th most in the NFL at 29.3 fantasy points per game. That's a huge number. They have to get these guys going, and Kirk Cousins is coming off his best game of the season where he threw for 306 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yes, it was against the Giants. I realize that. However, this Philadelphia Eagles defense can definitely be had through the air a lot easier than you can on the ground. It's a very solid run defense here for Philadelphia. Like I said, though, this is the last chance for Stephon Diggs. If he cannot produce in a matchup that is this positive for him, he may not see the start column unless he goes to another team, especially if the volume isn't there. On the Philadelphia side of things, Deshaun Jackson still not 100%, still unclear whether he plays or not. That means that Alshon Jeffrey is going to get a lot of attention, mostly from Xavier Rhodes here on the Minnesota Vikings side, and this defense is very, very solid. Being that they're not going to have a whole lot of other options on the outside to really pay attention to, I'm worried about Alshon Jeffrey. I can see him having a solid day. Maybe if you're in a full-point PPR league, I can see him going out there and getting 4 or 5 catches for 50, 60 yards. But if you're half-point PPR, standard leagues, not really enjoying the upside this week for Alshon Jeffrey. I've liked him here in the past, but in Week 6, he's going to be a sit. All right, and what could be one of the games of the week? We have the Texans and the Chiefs, and as you can tell, there's basically an explosion of symbols on the screen at this point. I mean, there's more clutter than your grandma's nightstand. But what do we do in this game? Well, you're still starting DeAndre Hopkins. Be patient. At least he's getting you close to double digits every single week. That's a lot better than some other underperforming studs right now. Be patient. The big games are coming. But what about Will Fuller? Like I said, he was probably one of our best calls of the week last week as a start. Wasn't exactly expecting 14 receptions, 217 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, holy wow. But that was a huge performance, and he won a lot of people, a lot of fantasy matchups. But what about this week? Well, we're still going to start Will Fuller here once again. With Kenny Stills not playing, Will Fuller started to get the attention once again of Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson starting to heat up. This is a team in Houston that cannot run the ball. They're going to have to throw. Who are they throwing it to? Will Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins, like them both in a matchup in which they may have to keep pace with the Kansas City Chiefs, whose offense has kind of sputtered here as of late. And it really depends on what weapons they have available to them this week. Sammy Watkins, dealing with a hamstring injury. Does he play? Tyreek Hill, does he come back this week? There's a chance that that happens. We really need to pay attention here second half of the week before we really make any decisions who we start or sit in this game. If Tyreek Hill sits, Sammy Watkins sits, all of a sudden DeMarcus Robinson and Mecole Hardman have big value. But if both Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins play, you really don't want a whole lot to do with DeMarcus Robinson or Mecole Hardman. So we really need to pay attention to the practice reports, the injury reports, to find out what's going on here into the weekend, because this is definitely a game that you want to have pieces of. There could be a lot of offense, a lot of points scored here this week, and you want to make sure that some of that is on your lineup. Saints and Jags up next, and hopefully all the Michael Thomas owners by now have released sphincter. They're not totally paranoid about what kind of wide receiver are they going to have with Teddy B under center. The guy is going to be just fine. We've never hopped off this bandwagon. Yeah, the touchdown upside took a slight hit, from a week-to-week basis, but the ceiling is still huge, and so is the volume. You're starting Michael Thomas. Ted Ginn, on the other hand, really big play dependent, and Teddy B doesn't go down the field deep very often. Ted Ginn, if you're just relying on that 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown to give you a solid day, may disappoint you more times than not. He's going to be a sit. But what do we do in Jacksonville? We have DJ Chark and Dede Westbrook. Both of these guys who deserve to be in the start column. The problem I have with DJ Chark is really what Marshawn Lattimore shows up for the New Orleans Saints. This guy was literally one of the worst defensive backs in the NFL the first few weeks of the season. However, the last 2 weeks has really shut out 2 huge studs. As of late, Mike Evans last week, 0. He scored 0. No receptions, no yardage. The week before that, locked down Amari Cooper to 5 catches for 48 yards. So which one are we going to get? Are we going to get the shutdown corner Marshawn Lattimore? If we do, DJ Chark is in for a very long week. If we get the first 3 weeks of the season, Marshawn Lattimore, DJ Chark could carry you to a fantasy win. It's a gamble. Which one does he get? We hear all these stories how he plays up to his opponent. Maybe he kind of takes it a little bit easier on DJ Chark. It's a gamble. It's a risk. The upside is there, but just know that going in. Now, Dede Westbrook, I like to see more volume going towards Dede Westbrook. He's not really one of these guys that's going to go out there and get huge plays on a consistent basis. He needs volume to get that PPR upside, that safe floor. He's starting to get it and gain that chemistry with Gardner Minshew. He is a flex play at best. Both of these guys, that's as high as I would put him. That's as high as I would trust him. The volume side for Westbrook, the touchdown upside for DJ Chark. Cross your fingers because they're going to have to throw here against the New Orleans Saints. Leonard Fournette is a solid running back, obviously, but the run defense of the New Orleans Saints, a lot tougher to run on than it is to pass on. Keep your fingers crossed. We'll see what happens here. Seahawks and Browns up next, and we're going to roll out most of the pieces in this game. And I get it, the Browns' struggles are well documented by this point. I mean, everybody's hopping off the bandwagon here heading into Week 6. I get it. They looked horrible in Week 5, but at some point, they're going to get more consistent. They're not this bad overall. They're going to figure it out. Are they going to go out there and score 50 points a game? No, probably not. But for fantasy purposes, I can definitely start seeing it kind of take a turn for the better here in the next few weeks. So you got to keep rolling OBJ out there. they need to improve the play calling in Cleveland. For him to go out there and get 4 targets, but yet they're motioning him into the backfield, pitching him the ball in the running game out of the backfield, having him return punts late in the fourth quarter. Having him throw passes. What is going on with Odell Beckham? They need to utilize his skills that he has, leave him on the outside, and throw him the ball and let him go get it. Jarvis Landry, been a little bit safer the past couple weeks, especially in PPR leagues, kind of give you that safer floor. That's kind of where he's going to remain. If you have better options on your bench, I'm not against sitting Jarvis Landry. The ceiling is somewhat limited because it's just so inconsistent. However, the floor in a PPR league is pretty safe at this point. But what about the Seattle Seahawks? I'm actually getting a little bit worried, starting to worry about Tyler Lockett. Over the past 2 games, he's only had 4 targets in each game. This is somebody who was seeing double-digit targets the first few weeks of the season. And now, 4 in back-to-back games? That kind of worries me a little bit. In Cleveland right now, they're the 7th best defense against opposing wide receivers, giving up only 19.9 fantasy points per game. It sounds like Greedy Williams and Ward are going to be back here this week for the Cleveland Browns, which is going to improve that secondary. They've been without him here for the last few weeks. I'm going to go ahead and stick with Lockett. They move him around the field enough to put him in a position to be successful, and the touchdown upside is always there for Tyler Lockett. But DK Metcalf, he just doesn't see enough volume to have that safety. It wasn't 10 minutes after his touchdown pass last week, I had somebody come on the video and say, hey, you missed on DK Metcalf. Well, the guy didn't have a catch the rest of the game. So if I'm out there relying on 1 catch a game to seal my fantasy day, it's too much of a risk for me. I'm going to keep DK Metcalf on the bench until I can get a little bit more volume headed his way. Bengals and Ravens up, and another good start here for Tyler Boyd of the Cincinnati Bengals. A great matchup for him. Right now, the Ravens giving up on average 25 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. He's had double-digit targets 4 out of the last 5 weeks. The only competition he really has at this point is Auden Tate, who I have there as a flex play, and this is more in deeper leagues or if you have no other options. The guy is a huge red zone threat. He's not really going to go out there and get you 10-plus targets a game. However, the big chunks of yardage, the big play opportunity, it's somebody that they've been looking at more consistently in this offense. If you're looking for a wide receiver there, like I said, especially in the red zone, a great option. And they may have to throw the ball a little bit more this game. The Baltimore offense is another one of these offenses that has kind of sputtered the past couple weeks. Baltimore right now, especially with Marquise Hollywood Brown, they've seen his targets go down 4 straight weeks. They have to get him more involved. They do not want to turn him into a touchdown-dependent wide receiver. Otherwise, it kills so much fantasy value. We need to see the volume going his way. I expect that to start this week. He has a very solid ceiling. If the volume is there, the floor becomes safer. I'm going to put Marquise Brown in there once again because I think he has another one of those big plays here this week in Week 6. As for Willie Snead, it's not a great matchup for Willie Snead. He's another one of these guys that puts up decent numbers, but is inconsistent and not somebody who you want to trust on a weekly basis. If you're in a 14-team league or larger, he becomes somewhat of an option. Maybe you start multiple flex plays, then maybe as your 3rd or 4th flex, he becomes an option. But in all the standard normal fantasy football leagues, Willie Snead remains on the bench. All right, Niners and Rams up next, and in my opinion, the safest bet's probably going to be Cooper Kupp for the Los Angeles Rams. He's proven to be one of the best wide receivers here in fantasy football for 2019, and it's the way that they use him. Put him in the slot, put him in space, get the ball in his hands, let him make something happen. Plus, huge red zone threat for Jared Goff. Right now, the San Francisco 49ers only allow 21.5 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, and that pass rush is legit for the 49ers. They get to the quarterback so long, it really limits the routes that the wide receivers can run. They can't get deep down the field because Goff isn't going to have that long to hold on to the football. What does that mean? More short to intermediate passes going towards Cooper Kupp, going towards Robert Woods, who's a little bit more of a flex play at this point, just because the touchdown upside is a little bit lower than Cooper Kupp's. But, with Brandon Cooks not being 100%, does he clear concussion protocol? Even if he does, not huge on Brandon Cooks this week. Why? He really lives and dies by the deep ball, and we just talked about he's not going to have time to get down the field. That pass rush is going to be there so quick in the backfield that Brandon Cooks may be very limited here this week. Cooper Kupp is the one guy that I would start for sure for the Rams. Looking for a flex play, that's where Robert Woods comes into play. Now, on the San Francisco 49ers side of it, I'm really not going to start anybody. They don't see enough volume in the passing game because they run the ball so much. The best running game in the NFL right now is in San Francisco. And don't fix it if it ain't broke. They're going to continue to run a lot. and that just really limits the volume that these wide receivers see. Yeah, there may be some big plays at times to the Marquise Goodwins, the Dante Pettises, the Deebo Samuels, but none of them are going to be consistent enough on a weekly basis just to trust in your fantasy lineup. What's going to happen, though, is somebody's going to have a big play, and then they're going to rush to the waiver wire, grab him next week, start him, and the guy's going to come out and get 3 points. That's basically how this offense works. They keep you guessing, and none of them are going to be in my starting lineup here for Week 6. Falcons and Cardinals up next, and a lot of people excited for the potential offense here in this game. There could be a lot of points put up on the board because they're two horrible defenses going head-to-head. Right now, the Falcons give up on average 31 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Christian Kirk back at practice in a limited fashion. Does he even play this week? That remains to be seen. If he doesn't, that's even more targets going towards Larry Fitzgerald. He has a very safe floor. I was expecting more from him last week. Didn't get that big play or the touchdown. Larry Fitzgerald, though, is somebody in this offense who's going to remain to be heavily targeted. He needs that big play. He needs that touchdown to put him over the top. But if Christian Kirk sits, this could be a great week for Larry Fitzgerald. Now, on the Falcons side of the football, we're obviously going to start Julio Jones. I mean, we're not debating that at this point. He's had a couple bad weeks. However, we've seen this before with Julio. He'll go through a stretch where he'll put up, back-to-back 4-point weeks. And then he'll come out and get 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in a week. You can't sit that type of upside. Julio Jones is going to be in your starting lineups here once again. It was good to see Calvin Ridley bounce back last week. They really need to get him involved more. He saw more targets last week since he'd seen since week 2. They need to get him more involved in this offense. The upside is still there, and I'm going to start Calvin Ridley also. I get a lot of questions about Mohamed Sanu, another one of these guys with a very safe floor, especially in PPR leagues. However, I think his upside is a little bit more limited, a little bit more inconsistent than that of Calvin Ridley or Julio Jones. I would rather have Jones or Ridley this week. However, deeper leagues, looking for extra flex spots, maybe you got some guys on a bye week. Mohamed Sanu, not a bad choice as a flex play here in Week 6. Cowboys and Jets up next, and we're going to be starting both Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup once again. Put up big days in Week 5. Expect maybe a little bit more of the same here in Week 6. Both of these wide receivers saw 14 targets in Week 5. It was kind of a question of how healthy Michael Gallup is. Well, I think he's pretty healthy. Looked to be 100% to me. Had a 100-yard game first game back, and is definitely a piece that I want to have in my fantasy football lineup. Both of these guys, they're going to be utilized in this offense. Defenses have to stay honest and play inside the box to take away Zeke the best they can. What does that do? More one-on-one coverage for Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, and they've already proven they can dominate that one-on-one coverage. But what do we do for the Jets? I kind of struggled here. I kind of wanted to start Jamison Crowder. We saw it earlier in the season when he played with Sam Darnold, who does return this week, that the volume was really there for Jamison Crowder, and it gave him, that safe floor play. But this is the first game back for Darnold. It could be a difficult matchup for the New York Jets. I would prefer to give them one more week. I mean, let's be realistic. At this point, you're not reliant on Robbie Anderson or Jamison Crowder for your fantasy football team. You have other options. It's very possible that they go out there and have a solid fantasy day in Week 6. But I want to see Sam Darnold healthy. I want to see him throwing the football. And I want to see some of that production come back, some of that volume come back for some of these guys before I just automatically trust to throw them right back into my lineup. So if they do have a solid day, don't kick yourself in the backside for not starting them. Let's see where this offense goes now that Sam Darnold is back and make our decisions going forward. Titans and Broncos up next, and really the only piece I care about here is going to be Courtland Sutton. Going up against the Tennessee Titans, a top 10 pass defense against opposing wide receivers here as far as fantasy football goes. But Courtland Sutton has really established himself as being the number one option here for the Denver Broncos. He's had 3 touchdowns over his last 2 games, and Emmanuel Sanders has kind of just become really inconsistent. The floor has really been showing for Emmanuel Sanders here as of late. Now, over the past 3 games, he's had 123 yards receiving. Not bad, but 104 of them came in one game. That means the other 2 games, he had a combined 19 yards total. That is a very low floor. A floor so low that it could lose your fantasy football matchup on a weekly basis. In my opinion, I'm not taking that risk here this week. Let's see him get a little bit more consistent here before we put him back into our lineup. Now, on the Tennessee side of things, if you want to talk about inconsistent, you talk about Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. very big play dependent. A run-first offense in Tennessee, and these are two names that I can't just trust on a weekly basis. Their talent is through the roof, but in a matchup going up against the Denver Broncos, who right now are top 5 against opposing wide receivers, allowing only 19.1 fantasy points per game, I'm passing on both Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. Steelers and Chargers up next, and now we're down to the third-string quarterback in Pittsburgh, Devlin Hodges. Yeah, don't worry. You've probably never heard of him. Don't worry about it. However, last week, when he came into the game after Mason Rudolph got knocked out, he didn't look horrible. He looked composed for the most part. But how much of the offense do they open up for him this week? That's the big question. I mean, going up against the Chargers, who are a top 10 defense against opposing wide receivers, allowing only 21.4 fantasy points per game. So what do we do with Juju? I mean, I expect a lot of James Conner, a lot of check down passes, possibly a lot of underneath routes. Can Juju break a big play? That's kind of probably what's going to happen to give him that great fantasy day. However, based off of volume alone, because there will be no James Washington, who is out and not playing this game. Deontay Johnson, another solid play, but more big play dependent. Do they really unleash Devlin Hodges to throw the ball deep downfield? I don't know. I see a lot of underneath routes with Juju, a lot of James Conner here this week. He's more of a flex play, is Juju. I mean, he's already had that limited upside anyway, and now he even takes a little bit more of a hit. But if you're in PPR leagues, I actually think it's okay just due to the volume alone that he should see. Now, what about on the Chargers side of things? I know a lot of people kind of disappointed with Keenan Allen here the past couple weeks, but don't forget, he had a long touchdown play called back 2 weeks ago. That really would have solidified a huge day for him, and maybe we're not even talking about the last 2 weeks. Maybe he just had one down week, and people are kind of just chalking it up to 2019 fantasy football because it happens. You're still starting Keenan Allen. I'm also going to start Mike Williams this week. A lot of questions whether he was 100% healthy. He came out, had 13 targets last week. So it looks like a great matchup once again for the Chargers. Going to throw both of these guys out there. They're going to throw the ball throughout the game. We know Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon are going to be involved. We know they look down the field for Mike Williams. Keenan Allen will eat up all the underneath routes. Could be some decent days for all these guys. I have them both inside my start column here for Week 6. Lions and Packers Monday Night Football, and the biggest question mark in this game is Davante Adams. Does he play or not? We still don't know. Something we need to watch going into the weekend. But maybe he does play, and maybe it's more of a limited fashion. Maybe he's out there as a decoy to draw the defensive coverage of one Darius Slay away to really open up the field to not only the running game, but maybe MVS on the opposite side. That's something to pay attention to. So if Davante Adams plays, I'm very much tempering expectations. However, with that touchdown upside, you're still going to start him. Just kind of not expecting possibly a huge game. Try to maybe be pleasantly surprised with what you do get from him. Now, MVS, I think is a solid start, especially if Davante Adams does play. He will draw less defensive coverage. He had an absolute horrible Week 5. Expected a lot more out of him there with no Davante Adams, but MVS is definitely one of those guys who can get yards in bunches, and he would be in my start column here once again. Kenny Golladay, another one of these guys who's averaging right now 14.5 fantasy points per game. When you have a wide receiver like that, you keep him in your lineup regardless of the matchup. The touchdown upside is huge. As for Geronimo Allison and Marvin Jones, they're both in the sit column for me. Both inconsistent. The volume hasn't really been there for Geronimo Allison, kind of like we expected maybe earlier in the season. Neither one of those guys are somebody who I'm willing to throw in my lineup here for Week 6. All right, those are my starts and sits. Week 6, wide receiver position. Let me know what you think down below. And don't forget, we're giving away $1,000. It's literally a video on our channel right now. If you have not checked it out, you need to. There's a link down below in the description. All you have to do is go watch the video, follow the simple instructions, and you're entered to win that drawing on October 31st. So do not miss out on that opportunity. $1,000 cash. Who doesn't want $1,000? But hey, really appreciate the support here. If you guys are new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. Let me know down below that you're new. I'd love to welcome you here to Headliner Nation. This is a great community that continues to grow and is full of positivity and people who just love fantasy football. So really appreciate the support out there. Hopefully you guys have a great end of your week. Good luck this weekend. We'll talk to you later.